Good afternoon. If we can move towards our seats, we will begin the speaking portion of the program. Just a quick housekeeping notes. Can we silence our phones and or turn them off or whatever we need to do in this tech era that we're living in? Thank you all for coming. For those who don't know me, I am Jeff Brown, Kenny's cousin, and he was so much more than that, my mentee, my big brother, and you name it, he was that. So again, thank you all for coming. Want to introduce his running buddy, one of his very best friends that go way back to the Sandlot, Ronnie Lancaster, who will introduce the president of Catholic University. And I want to extend a very sincere thanks to Catholic for extending the venue and their hospitality. It has been unbelievable. So, Ronnie.
Good afternoon. It is a joy to welcome you all here this afternoon. On April 11th, we all became a little poorer with the loss of Kenneth Walker. 2 days after that, I got a text from Jeff. And he said, you know, Ronnie, we're beginning to think about a memorial program. And he said, we were wondering, would it be possible to hold it at Catholic University? And I said, Jeff, I'll be glad to inquire. So I emailed a gentleman by the name of Scott Rimbold, who's the executive vice president here at the university. And it was on a Friday, and I didn't hear back from Scott. And that was unusual, because Scott typically responded very quickly. So I called him on his cell phone the next day, and I caught him in his car. He was on the way to the airport to pick up a daughter to bring her home, who was coming home from college to celebrate Easter. So he said, yeah, Ronnie, I didn't get back to you because it was Good Friday and the university was closed. I thought, gee, why didn't I realize that? So I said, you know, we started to talk about Kenny. He said he had written his expressions of sympathy before, but we engaged in that. And I said, Scott, you know, the family has asked me to inquire about the possibility of holding Kenny's program at Catholic. And then I said, and the family would be very grateful. And there was silence. And after a few seconds, he began to respond. And he didn't use these words, but the sentiment was, Ronnie, you have it backwards. And then when he spoke, he said, actually, it is we who would be honored to host Kenny's program at Catholic University. And I started with that story to remind us what we already know, and that is the effect that Kenny had on virtually everyone with whom he interacted. And so today we have the joy of celebrating an amazing life in this beautiful room, thanks to Catholic University. And with that, it's my privilege to introduce the president of Catholic University of America, Dr. Kilpatrick.
So Scott Rimbold is my running buddy, and we are all pleased and honored to be able to celebrate the life of Kenny Walker here today. What a tremendous loss for our university, for his family, for his friends, for his colleagues, for everyone that he worked with. Kenny was just a trailblazer, a remarkable man. So as my name's Peter Kilpatrick, as president of the Catholic University of America, it's just an honor for me to welcome you to the celebration of life of Kenny Walker. In 1969, Catholic University launched the partnership program with the admission of 30 African American students from the Washington, D.C. area. Now, they were not the first African American students here. I was sharing with Ronnie, I spoke with Deacon Tim Tillman, who's the deacon in Anacostia, and his grandfather went here in the 50s. So he was a bit of a trailblazer as well. But the admission of the partnership program was our first cohort. And you know what the 60s were like. It was a challenging time in our country. And it was a challenging time for those 30 students in the partnership program. But they persevered, and they blazed a trail that we believe has really begun 50 years later, 55 years later, to open up the university to be much more welcoming and much more inclusive. And that's something that I'm proud of as president. It's something I'm totally committed to. After all, you know, we live in Washington, D.C., and we know what a community Washington, D.C. is, and we feel like we owe it to our community. Their arrival marked a transformative moment in the history of our university. It dramatically increased our black undergraduate population, but more importantly, it planted seeds of change that would shape this institution for generations to come. And Kenny was one of those pioneering students. His time on campus helped ignite a remarkable journey in his professional career, one that was defined by deep curiosity, unwavering courage, and a lifelong commitment to the truth. Kenny went on to build a very distinguished career, as we know, in journalism, with roles at the Washington Star, National Public Radio, ABC News. In 1985, his reporting for ABC News Nightline brought international attention to apartheid-era South Africa, amplifying critical conversations and elevating voices like that of Bishop Tutu for American audiences. And later, as NPR's Africa Bureau chief based in Johannesburg, he brought a global lens to his work, covering a continent in transition with insight and integrity. Kenny remained in South Africa for many years, continuing his work as a communicator, a storyteller, including with the humanitarian organization CARE. Through his compelling reporting and sharp journalistic lens, Kenny captured the triumphs and tensions of societies in flux, informing, challenging, and inspiring audiences far beyond the places he covered. We need his journalism today. In 2023, Kenny returned to share his story in No Longer Out of Reach, which was our documentary marking the 50th anniversary of that first partnership program class. His reflections were powerful, a testament to the lasting impact of opportunity and the enduring importance of representation, of voice, and of vision. So today we honor Kenny, not simply for the career that he built, but for the difference that he made. A pioneer, a witness to history, and a man who never stopped asking the questions that really matter. And so we're committed to continue his legacy and to try to guide and inspire others in his spirit. And so to begin this celebration of life, and I'm going to make an apology to you. I have a law school commencement. I've got a flight to catch. But I was so pleased that I was able to come for even a short period of time to share my reflections about Kenny, because what a wonderful hero he is to us here at the Catholic University of America. And I believe our first sharer is Jackie Demesme-Gray. So Jackie, please, could you come up and share?
Well, good afternoon. I have to check my watch to make sure it is afternoon. So, thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you, everyone, for helping to put this together. Most importantly, thank you for your presence. I know that Kenny would be so richly blessed by the president's remarks and just being in this beautiful venue that meant so much to so many, not only to them, but to history. So in that regard, I'm very blessed. And my name is Jackie Demesme Gray, and Kenny was my dear friend for nearly 60 years. And so while many accolades about his career and numerous accomplishments will be shared today, I'd like to offer a more personal perspective as his former spouse. And I'm looking over here and see so many family faces that I haven't seen, but that I dearly love. My kisses to you all as well. And as many of you all would know, particularly you all, Kenny was my first love. And he used to profess that I was his. But perhaps I may have to get to those pearly gates. But until then, we hold on to that, because that's our truth. So Kenny and I were very young when we met in high school, and we fell in love. And we got married shortly thereafter. And he was a loving and caring husband, but more importantly, he was my dear friend. He was always competitive and loved to have the last word, and I'm sure many of y'all can understand that, and that's probably an amen for many. He enjoyed engaging in lengthy discussions with my dad, often challenging him on important events and political topics. And my dad loved a good debate, but Kenny was a passionate debater. So I'm not sure who really won those debates. So I will leave here today by saying I think it was a tie. But together we welcomed a beautiful, beautiful daughter named Maisha, whom we cherished deeply and considered our most precious gift. I often wondered who adored her most, Kenny or me. Kenny was an excellent father. He shared his gift of communication with Maisha, who in turn shared her passion for writing and journaling. And as a young child, Kenny would dress Maisha in beautiful African attire and arrange professional photo shoots to capture those precious moments, making her feel like she was his special doll. And I did see a few, there's one there, you can see her in some of the photos. That was one of the photo shots with her. And he would often smile, reminiscing about that special occasion when we visited Oakland for his mother to meet Maisha. And we attended a Black Panther meeting while we were there, and we had the privilege of meeting Huey Newton. So Kenny's activist spirit was evident during those very early years. And I vividly recall a time when we, along with two of our dear friends, Andy and Freddie, made dinner reservations at one of what we thought the most elegant restaurants in D.C. In our eyes, this place was nothing short of swanky. So we were dressed to impress, with our natural hair out this far, and in our finest African attire, thanks to Andy who made it for us. We were eager to get to that restaurant and make a huge entrance. So as we entered the restaurant, Kenny confidently strode in with his staff, as only Kenny would do, followed by the rest of us. And when we announced our reservation, and when he announced the reservation in his deepest voice, the maitre d' quickly acknowledged us and, to our surprise, escorted us to our seats. I'm here to tell you Kenny was fuming. He had prepared himself to be indignant and was ready to walk out if they failed to recognize our attire as appropriate for that restaurant. And I still maintain today he didn't enjoy his meal that evening Why? Because he expected to be asked to leave rather than to pay for our very expensive. So Kenny was driven by a journalistic spirit at a very young age. He was incredibly curious and determined, and he saw every opportunity as a means to uncover a hidden story. In my vivid memory stands out our anniversary dinner. We were dressed to the nines and singing along to our favorite song in the car. Now, y'all know Kenny had a good voice, and he loved to sing. But as we were driving along, Kenny noticed a building engulfed in flames. Without a moment's hesitation or even a glance at me, he pulled over, grabbed his pad and pen, and began interviewing everyone gathered there at that fire. And there I sat. You know, Kenny's composure was impeccable. He maintained a calm demeanor, even under pressure. However, when he returned to the car and saw my expression, he quickly realized we were 40 minutes late, and he drove off as quickly as he could. Yes, Kenny had a playful side, along with a strong sense of determination and a hint of arrogance. Hint of arrogance. Hello. He would proudly acknowledge it, saying, "That's just who I am." Well, this often led me to reintroduce myself to him by saying, "Kenny, my name is Jackie Demesme, but for you, it's Jackie, don't mess with me." And we would share a heart, you know, he loved that kind of going back and forth, you know. That's probably why we stayed friends for 60 years. And we would share a hearty laugh and then continue with our day. But as Maisha grew older, Kenny's love and admiration for her deepened. He took her to various events, met many celebrities, including a very special occasion when he went and introduced her to President Reagan at Camp David. Over time, their relationship blossomed, transitioning from a typical father-daughter relationship into an enduring friendship. He adored Maisha. Our precious Maisha, a Spelman graduate, woohoo, met her Morehouse man, hello, hello, Vincent Hunter, whom we adore, and then blessed us with 3 beautiful grandchildren, Lauren, Alana, and Jordan. This always fills me up when I call their name. But what was funny about it, refusing to be called grandpa, y'all can imagine that, Kenny was never a grandpa, he quickly became their baba. I think that was a South African term, while my dear's husband, Chuck, became pop-pop. And our grands quickly became our heart's delight, each one capturing our affection and filling our lives with immense joy and love. And tragically, our precious Maisha passed away in 2017, leaving us in the most challenging time in our life. Kenny and I would often chuckle afterwards as we were reminiscing, and as we reminisced about our grandchildren, trying to pinpoint which one reminded us the most of Maisha and when. While our opinions may fluctuate from day to day, perhaps hour to hour, we soon realized that each grandchild embodied a unique aspect of Maisha's sweet and resilient spirit, a legacy that we cherish deeply in our hearts. Yes, Kenny cherished his grandchildren and was incredibly proud of you all's remarkable achievements. And although they inherit certain traits from each of their parents, they are truly unique creations of God, blessed with grace, faith, and resilience. So today, I bid farewell to my dear friend. And yes, I'm filled with sadness, knowing that I'm going to miss our shared laughter and his sharp wit. Well, maybe I'll miss that. I'm not quite sure. I'll figure that one out later. But on the other hand, seriously, I'm also very blessed that his accomplishments are being shared by many, ensuring that he will leave a lasting legacy for our grandchildren to forever cherish. So, Kenny, your light will be forever etched in our hearts. Sweet dreams, my dear friend, and my endless love for our daughter, Maisha. God bless. Thank you.
In no specific order, we'd like to have the Hunter children come up and share a word with us. You can come up at the same time. I love it.
Good afternoon. I'm going to put this a little higher. My name is Lauren. I am the oldest out of the three. Just share a little bit about my Baba. When I was younger, he used to have us, I remember all the time, play Scrabble against him. And he would always win. And then I'd be like, is that a word? And he was like, well, you can challenge me. But if you challenge me and you're wrong, your turn is skipped. And I was like, all right, fine, I don't challenge you. And I don't know if you guys have seen the movie Akila and the Bee, but I used to tell my mom all the time, that's just like Baba. She's like, it doesn't look like him, but yes, his character can come off like that. At first it might seem like he's like hard on you, but really he just wants to bring out what he knows he sees in you and just encourage you and bring more wisdom into you and question you so that you know for sure what you know. So you say something, he's going to be like, okay, well, what about this? Like, he wants to be like, okay, do you know what you know for sure? And I remember later in life, I played against Baba again in Scrabble, and I won. And I was like, yes. And I challenged him, and there were words that weren't words. And I was like, this is what you've been doing. He's like, no, you just know more words now. And he was like, we can play again. I said, no. I want to end on that win. So a little bit later, I sent him I think it was a Father's Day gift maybe, and I think Cousin Jeff actually found it, and then my dad showed it to me. I was like, oh, wow, forgot about that. I made a frame that had some Scrabble pieces on it, and it had Baba, author, family, and love. And then inscribed on the paper, it said, words are influential, whether articulated or transcribed. Words can bring about change. And I feel like that quote, for me, really just stood out for who he was. He used his words wisely. He knew they were impactful. And he sought out to bring about change, whether it was with his family, whether it was with his coworkers, whether it was with his friends and family. He was very intentional for what he did and the words that he said. So thank you all for coming. I'm excited to hear what else you guys have. So yeah, thank you.
My name's Alana. I'm the middle child. And I'm just more so than sad, I'm grateful today, just for the legacy that Baba left. And when I think about him, I think the most thing that I respect is his passion. He believed what he believed, and no one could tell him different. So going forward in my life, that's something that I want to carry, is a passion for what I believe in and to fight for what I believe in. I was able to see Baba a few weeks before he passed away, and I'm grateful for that because we were able just to catch up. We both bonded together about Africa because I've been multiple times as he's been way more than I'll probably ever be over there, but I'm just grateful for our relationship. It blossomed over time. We were able to get to a point where he'd say something, I'd say something, he'd say something, I'd say something. It gets more sarcastic. It ends up chuckling, and I'm just like, yeah, like, it's gonna end there. So I don't know, I'm grateful for his life, for all of you all, for family. We know that everyone comes to a point in their life where they're gonna pass away, but it's those moments that mean the most each and every day, because you never know when your last day will be. And it's just a blessing each and every day that you don't know what life will bring, but Jesus Christ is the answer. And many people think you can get to God a certain way, but it's Jesus Christ. And he gives us a chance not only to have a relationship with each and every person, but Jesus and God the Father. And that's through Jesus Christ, because he loves us. He loves us more than our family loves us. And so I come here today just to be grateful for everything that God has done for us. And that's all I have to say.
Hello, my name is Jordan. I'm the youngest out of the three. I'm 23. I'm here to speak about my Baba. I know to a lot of y'all, he's a hero, trailblazer, a lot of accolades to his name, very powerful, but to me, he was more than that. I spoke with my Baba a lot more than people know, and it's even hard for me to be up here right now talking about him. I loved him a lot. I love him so much, and I'm just thankful to share the memories we had. If y'all know, late night, he would come stay with us in Atlanta, and he would stay up till like 2 a.m., always reading the newspaper. And my big back self wanted to be in the kitchen when it's closed and try to get some food, and we end up talking. He'd be there drinking his wine, sipping his Hennessy, and we bond and sit there and talk, and he'd be teaching me. Little did I know it wasn't just talking, he was teaching. And he was instilling his intellect and the things he learned in his life into me. And I'm sorry for crying right now, trying to hold it together, but I really didn't understand at the time a lot of the things he was saying, just from being a black man in America. And I couldn't really resonate with it at the time, but now I do. And I'm able to use the things he gave me as a key to life to be successful. And I'm just thankful to have shared them times with my Baba, including just the little things, cooking. And yesterday we had a dinner, and people just coming and sharing their stories. There's so much of Baba and me that I didn't even know. Simple from having the afro, having a pick in my head, Mama Rita and Nana saying, take the pick out your head, just loving to eat, just simple things. And I'm glad everybody got here to experience their own relationship with Baba. And thank you for coming and sharing these moments and spending it with us. And may Baba rest in peace. And, love you, Baba. And next up, my father, Vincent Hunter, will come up and say some words about Baba. Thank you.
How's everybody doing? I can definitely say that I hear a lot and learned a lot, and a lot of the things that Jordan just mentioned and the kids just mentioned are intangible. The Scrabble games, I definitely remember those nights. I definitely remember when Jackie and Baba were at the house and those conversations, and those were definitely ones for the books. I know when I first met Mr. Walker, and I call him Mr. Walker to date, I went to Morehouse, and Maisha went to Spelman, and we were coming up to drop her off, actually, and friends of mine were the drivers, and we pulled up to his house, and they say, hey, man, you know who that is? I said, no, that's Maisha's daddy. I said, no, no. I said, what are you talking about? So I walk in, enter the house. First picture I see is a picture of Ronald Reagan, Maisha, and her dad. I looked at Maisha, I said, who are you? She's like, well, my daddy's an anchor on ABC News. I said, oh, okay. From that point, like I say, Mr. Walker was very personable. I was a little intimidated by the, hi, Vinny, how are you doing? Yeah, so I'll share one other story. So I driven up to D.C., and I was taking Maisha out on a date, and I forgot my shoes. So, I went to him. At the time, I said, hey, well, I wear a size 13. He went to his closet. He said, well, Vinny, it is his exact voice, Vinny, you have two options. Maisha is expecting you to take her to this event. I said, I don't have any shoes, Mr. Walker, and all the stores are closed right now. He goes into his closet. Mr. Walker wore 8.5. 8.5. 8.5. I can tell you what those shoes look like, and I wore those shoes for 3.5 hours to the event. When we got back home, Mr. Walker, he had his Hennessy. And I said, what are you doing? He says, Vinny, how was the event? So that was nice, Mr. Walker. She enjoyed herself. He said, after that, Maisha went to bed. I went to the other room. He says, Vinny, when you guys got back and I came, he said, I knew you loved my daughter. And at that point in time, I had no problem with Mr. Walker. So I will definitely miss him. Like I said, I was up here probably a week and a half prior to him passing, and I was up down the street from his apartment. So I called him, and he's very particular. And I said, Mr. Walker, I'm in the neighborhood. I'm picking up a cake for someone. I just wanted to drop by and say hello. And again, he said, Vinny, I'm doing a little something right now, Vinny. I said, but Mr. Walker, I'm up here. I'll catch you the next time. So I didn't get to see him, but he was definitely pleasant. I'm glad to hear all the stories, especially about Catholic University, as well as just seeing the impact he's had on our kids. I can definitely see his vision and what he's put into, I always say our kids today. And he was definitely a great guy, passed on a lot of knowledge and information, and he definitely loved everybody in this room. So thank you for coming out, and you guys have a good day.
Before that, Jordan, don't ever apologize for shedding a tear. You're human, and that's just the love. So don't ever apologize for that. Next up will be Kenny's running mate from Catholic and Carol and all the parties, and you'll get a kick out of this. Ronnie Lancaster.
Good afternoon again. So I've known Kenny for 60 years. We met as freshmen in 1965 at Archbishop Carroll High School. And over our 4 years there, became not just friends, but brothers. I was privileged to be best man at his wedding, and I'm so honored that he was best man at mine. And I wanted to start with this picture because there are so many dimensions to this man, but you may or may not know that he was quite the actor. And I know you think this is an off-Broadway play, but it's actually Carroll High School. This is West Side Story. And Kenny is, as you can see on the right side, they're at the third step. And two persons over, up on the stage, that's me. You can tell I came from a poor family. We couldn't afford buttons. But I'm showing this picture to introduce the person in the middle. And his name is Charlie Ball. And I call him the incredible Charlie Ball for reasons that you'll hear in a minute. Now, Charlie had planned to be here. And in fact, I was going to be honored. Charlie was going to stay with me. But he called 2 days ago with a terrible cold, apologized, and coughing and sneezing all over the place, and still saying, well, I'm going to come, but I'll stay in a hotel. And, you know, we just said, Charlie, listen, you're not well, stay. So Charlie is watching by way of Zoom. So I told Charlie, like Carol Burnett, I'd wiggle my ear so he'd know that. But if Charlie were here, he would object to my characterization as the incredible Charlie Ball. But you will hear later why he is. I'm going to give you a little background about Charlie, but then I'm going to defer to Dr. Melanson to talk about the relationship between Charlie and Kenny, which, incredibly, we start here as seniors in this picture, and 50 years later, Charlie and Kenny reconnect in the most wonderful and intimate ways. So Kenny and I left Carroll, and by the way, that table over there, I know you're wondering, all of those handsome guys, how could they all sit at one table? Those are Carroll men. And that gentleman in the back, and as well as Merrill McKenzie, Dr. Merrill McKenzie. But the gentleman in the back with the white hair, that's Bill Barnes. That's Mr. Bill Barnes, who was Kenny's and mine math teacher. And he was not only a great teacher, but he was our big brother who just put up with us and had the meanest corner jump shot that you'd ever, want to see. So after Carroll, Kenny and I came to Catholic University, and I want to talk about how that happened. In 1968, we all know, sadly, that we lost Dr. King to an assassin's bullet. The response in this city among the 4 majority universities was to decide to recognize first that they weren't integrated in the city and to change that. So they agreed individually and collectively to go out into the DC public school system and recruit 30 black students, bring them to the campus with full rides. They created at Catholic University a program called Partnership. And it was called Partnership because it was funded by 3 streams of income: Catholic University, the Marriott Corporation, and the Evening Star newspaper. And so Kenny and I had the good fortune to date the 2 prettiest ladies in all of DC, and that's saying something. And that's the beautiful Jackie DeMesme and the beautiful Stephanie Early. So we were on a double date. We dropped the ladies off at home. Kenny comes to my house, as he typically did. My dad had friends over. One was a DC public school teacher who said, hey, I know you guys go to Carroll. Well, right down the street, have you heard what Catholic University is doing? And we said, no, what? She said, well, Catholic is offering 4-year scholarships to promising students. Well, Kenny and I knew nothing about this because we weren't in the DC public school system. So the next day, we called up Catholic University, and we met these 2 men. Please meet Leon LaBeouf on the left and Thaddeus Aubrey on the right. Leon and Thad. Little did we know that these 2 men would change our lives forever, and they remain central in our life today. And in fact, I'm hopeful that Thad, the gentleman on the right, on your left, with the glasses, we're holding 2 seats in case he's able to come. These are the 2 men that Catholic University, they're both Catholic alums. These are the 2 men that Catholic put in charge to create this program and implement it. So it was their responsibility to go out into the DC public schools and identify 30 promising black students and bring them into the university. Now, when Kenny and I called them, we were the last to arrive. So Kenny and I interviewed separately with these 2 men. And after a couple of days, Thad, on your left, calls me in, and he says, congratulations, Ronnie. He said, we're going to admit you to the university. He said, however, you're late. We've given out all the money. We'll try to find a few dollars, but basically here's a package of loans. To which I said, I'm grateful, thank you. Of course, my family couldn't have afforded college, so I was grateful to have a loan package, so I came. Next, 2 days later, they call in Kenny, and this time it's Leon on your right who brings in Kenny. And he says, Kenny, congratulations, you're accepted into the university, but you're late, we have no money, and that's that. But then Leon said something different. He said, but you're a person of extraordinary promise, and that's clear. Why don't you go down to the Evening Star and interview with a publisher and see if he'll give you a four-year scholarship? And Kenny, when he retells this story, says, quote, I was too young to know how ridiculous that was, end quote. But on down to the Star, Kenny went. And I think to everyone's surprise, except for Kenny, he comes back with a 4-year scholarship from the Evening Star. And Kenny was my teacher in many ways, but that was the first real lesson that I observed. And I learned from Kenny that in life, sometimes those given the least achieve the most. So fast forward now, and I'm going to talk about 2 events that Kenny was either the leader in or principal. There were kind of a gang of 8 of us here. There are many seated at this table here and in the back. And we began planning. Life had taken over after we graduated. So marriage, children, kids, life, jobs. But as we approached the 35th anniversary, Andy, that beautiful lady there, don't let that beautiful exterior fool you. She looks like a lovely grandmother, is very kind, but she's a taskmaster. And when she calls you, you jump. So Andy called us and said, you know, we're approaching the 35th anniversary. Why don't we figure out how to celebrate? So we said, great. So we gather in her office. She treats us to pizza. And we say, well, how about this idea? How about a dinner? How about a reception? And then we say, no, this is significant. Let's do something really important. So we land on the idea of creating an endowed scholarship. 3 reasons. 1, permanence. 2, to honor our beloved mentors. And 3, most importantly, to create a stream of income to support students coming behind us, like us, coming from working class families, first generation college students. And so we gathered up some money, came to the university, they agreed, signed papers, and created the Thaddeus Aubrey and Leon LaBeouf Endowed Scholarship here at the Catholic University of America. So because it's an endowed scholarship, as you know, you can't spend the corpus, you can only spend the income. It takes a couple of years to gather the income. So after a few years, we began to have a little money to award to students. So after about 5 years, we began a program every year to award scholarships to students. So this is what that looks like. So on your left is how we started. They were kind of informal gatherings. The students would come, they would talk about where they're from and what they were majoring in and what their plans were. But over the years, it grew into a more formal event, and now is a principal event every year during Alumni Weekend here at the university. And the picture on the right is that picture. In fact, that's here in this room. And I want to ask you to focus on the young man who's in the back row. And by the way, I want to point out the gentleman in the red jacket. His name is Joe Fisher. And Joe, where are you? Right here. So Joe is a double Hall of Fame person here at the university. All-American track star, Hall of Fame, Catholic University, and then inducted a second time into the Hall of Fame as a coach. But Joe's there on the stage and has been an integral part of creating and putting in place the scholarship, as have all of the people at that table and others. But I want to ask you to focus on the young man who's in the back on the far left. His name is Rashard Burks. And his story reads like a ready-to-be-made movie. So this is Rashard. So as you can see in the previous picture, he was an awardee. This is a statement he sent back to greet other awardees coming behind him. And the reason why I wanted to show Rashard is because Rashard was homeless through family circumstances. Came to the university again recognized his promise, brought him into the university, 4-year scholarship, room and board, tuition, job, everything. Well, you know what happens. Rashad graduates on time with honors. Rashad then applies to a dozen law schools, gets into all of them, including here at Catholic. I'm delighted to tell you that Rashad has just finished his first year at Cornell Law School. Now, what connects Rashad to us is that Kenny was his mentor. So Rashad is going to go on and do great things. And wherever he goes, he's going to take Kenny Walker with him. So fast forward now to our 50th anniversary. And Taskmaster Andy Collins calls us together again. We're meeting by Zoom now using technology. And we met, frankly, for over a 2-year period to discuss a number of initiatives that we were advancing here at Catholic University. Because, frankly, when we came, it was an inhospitable environment. And one of the reasons why we hold Thad and Leon so dear is because they protected us, they guided us through the university, and they ensured that we graduated. But we're at the 50th. Now it's a very different university, and this administration could not be more embracing and more supportive, and a complete 180. So we're approaching the 50th, and we said, how should we celebrate? So we decided we're going to ask the university for 2 things. The first is, please award honorary degrees to Thad and Leon in recognition of how special they are and their contributions to the university and in our lives. And the university said, no problem. The university didn't quite say no problem, because it's kind of a heavy lift to ask for an honorary degree, but they recognized how special Thad and Leon were. And then we said, and here's our second and final ask. And the university said, not so fast. The university, by the way, as we approached our 50th, we began to talk to the university about celebrating, and they said, great, who are you guys? And we said, well, we're the first class of the partnership program. And the university said, oh, that's great. What does that mean? Because after all, it had been 50 years. There were no records at all, no evidence, no footprints at all that we had ever been here. And of course, through the years, there had been several administrations coming and going, but there was no reference to us at all. So what we did was, in our class of 30, we put together 20 one-pagers about who we were and what we've done with our lives. And we gave that to the university, and we said, we're the partnership program, and this is what we've done. The university was blown away. And so because of that, the university said, before we could ask for our second and final thing, they said, we've hired a film crew, and we want to document the stories of several of you. And we watched the documentary last night at dinner, and it's 20 minutes long, so we're not going to play it today. But please take a look at it on YouTube. It's called No Longer Out of Reach. No Longer Out of Reach. And Mickey, where are you? Raise your hand. So Mickey and Andy and Kenny and I are in this documentary. But it was Mickey's phrase. Mickey talked about her journey. We're all DC natives. And she grew up, as we all did, in a very working class family. And she said, she would pass Catholic University, but the notion of coming to Catholic was out of our reach, out of her reach and out of our reach. And so the filmmaker loved that phrase and named it after what Mickey said. So, to no surprise, slide? Thank you. To no surprise, Kenny sparkles in that documentary. So we said, great, thank you for Catholic University for that amazing for that amazing gesture. We said, now, here's our second and final ask. We said, we'd like you, the university, to underwrite a big reception for all black students who had ever come to the university, whether they graduated or not. And the university said, slide, please. We'll do that. Generous in the extreme. And Dr. Kilpatrick, we had Dr. Kilpatrick to speak. He was later in the agenda on this program. We moved him up to the top because it was commencement weekend. He had a dozen places to be. Dr. Kilpatrick was there before we started, and he was kind of the last person to leave. He would not leave that reception. And let me tell you, everyone there noticed it. It was a very different Catholic university. So several of us spoke on the program, but the last speaking position with every program we've ever had was reserved for, slide please, this man. How could it be? Kenny was with us only 2 years. After 2 years, the Evening Star, when we came to the university, offered him a full-time job. Kenny, with his bride and beautiful baby girl, decided, I need to work full-time, and went to work, and that ended his academic career here, but began his journalism career. So you wonder, how can it be that this man, who spent 2 years and 2 years only here, winds up being the most celebrated of everyone in our class? How can that be? But this is evidence that that is exactly who he was. We could count on Kenny to be the anchor speaker and inspire us as we ended the program. So I'm going to end with this final picture. Slide, please. This is where Dr. Kilpatrick began, and this is where I want to end. In the front is, of course, on each side, Thad and Leon seated. In the back are 9 of the original 30 members of that inaugural class. But in the middle, for the seat of honor, how many guesses do we need? And this was, for me, the final lesson from Kenny. It was a reminder of where we started, and that is sometimes those given the least achieve the most. And now it's my privilege to introduce someone we all know, and that's Miss Charlene Hunter Galt.
My goodness, I wasn't quite ready for that. I was busy listening to everybody else. I am so thrilled to be here and to hear these wonderful words about Kenny, because my husband Ron, who's sitting here with me, and I knew him primarily in South Africa. So it's really great to hear from some of you about the times before South Africa. But long before I met Kenny in person, I could tell that we were on the same page. That is, when it came to reporting on Black people, our people, no worry about identifying with who we were and who our people were. But it wasn't until I traveled to South Africa in some of the darkest days, that was 1985, that proved to be true. We were both reporting on what was going on. I remember again, 1985. Some of you in this room weren't even born, but we were both reporting on what was going on in the Black townships, as well as the status of Nelson Mandela, who had been serving time on a remote prison miles off the coast of Cape Town. You couldn't even get there unless you were on a boat, but nobody was able to go to visit because that was just how they treated people like Nelson Mandela. He had become symbolic of the fight against heavy-handed oppression and injustice. There was these were actually some of the most challenging times I've ever experienced, where apartheid police were everywhere, trying to keep its attempts to prevent the truth from being told. But we persisted, even when we ourselves were threatened with jail. And when we would leave the streets of the Black townships, we would still be watched by our South African hosts, pretending, that is, to be friendly, but who were really undercover agents of the apartheid government. So it was, to be sure, a challenging time. But Kenny Walker was undaunted by any of this. And as a result, he opened the eyes of Americans in particular to the brutal reality of apartheid. Years later, when Ron and I moved to South Africa, Ken became one of our best friends, to the extent that when he met the South African woman he fell in love with, he asked me to perform the ceremony, which I happily did. But that one didn't last either. So Kenny's love of the country did, and he maintained a strong commitment to making sure that South Africa could be all it could be for all of its people, becoming, in some ways, a small entrepreneur, leasing properties that he had acquired. One of the many things I loved about Kenny, though, was how he always had a sense of a higher order of things. And his commitment to a new South Africa was proof of that. Ron and I were so pleased, Ron, my husband, and I were so pleased to be in Kenny's inner circle. And we spent a lot of time going over the as yet unresolved post-apartheid issues and how they compared with unresolved issues, racial, that is, in the United States. Not all was serious analysis of the ongoing racism in both places, but in fact, on one occasion, while we were serious most of the time, but on one occasion, my husband's birthday, Kenny volunteered to sing happy birthday to him, which, by the way, everybody loved, despite a bit of laughter as he sang it. But Clinty always had a sense of a higher order of things. And when he decided to leave journalism, he decided to remain in South Africa to help the country he had long loved become the country he had hoped it could be. After leaving journalism, again, as you've heard, which he dearly loved and just made such an example of being an excellent journalist, but he remained, after he left journalism, he remained in the country that he loved and devoted his time to helping it live up to what he and so many others had fought for. Moreover, while I was on my annual trip back to the United States, my mother, who lived with us in South Africa, passed away. And while I organized a service in her hometown of Atlanta, Kenny organized not one, but two funeral services for my mother. And he joined friends who accompanied her body to the airport. There must have been 20 cars because Kenny had organized two different services and invited all of those people to come to the airport to see my mother off. I just have so many wonderful memories of Ken, like the rest of you, especially his love of South Africa and its many traditions, including the one we learned, he and I, from Nelson Mandela, whom we both saw often and who we came to be, I think, kind of friends with him, even though there were times when we reported on what was going on. But one of the things that President Mandela shared with us was that the South Africans believe that when a person close to you passes away, they will always be, that person will always be for you. And when you have a problem, all you have to do is spend some time telling that person, that angel, what your problem was. Because they don't use the word death. They prefer to use the word transition, because a person in transition who, like Kenny was to so many people we've heard today, he was one of us. And so, Kenny, I kind of hope you are listening today, because we have a few things we need your advice on, both here and in South Africa. So, Kenny, listen to the rest of the people who loved and respected you, and listen to me, because we all need you and your voice now. And it exists in the words of people we've heard today and in articles he's written. We love you, Kenny, and we will take our problems to you whenever we have them. And again, I'm hoping that in these challenging times that we have both here in America and in South Africa, Kenny can send us some ways to get past that, and for both of our countries to be the country that he fought for, because he loved them both. Thank you so much, and thanks all of you for your wonderful words about this wonderful angel of mercy.
A quick note, the first trip to South Africa for me and most of our family, we went to Charlene's home, and I was jet lagging awfully, like Green Acres at 3 in the morning, jet lagging. And Charlene was playing music, and she said, "Here we dance." I said, "No, I'm tired." She said, "I didn't ask." "Here we dance." So her home, I think, was on West Cliff or North Cliff, and it was on this beautiful ridge, and her spirit was just incredible. So she's family. Next, we will have family, Tabia Berry, Kenny's sister, who was flown in to be with us, to come share a word.
I'm Anna, Uncle Kenny's favorite niece. And I'm Tabia Berry from California. I'm her big aunt. After 21 years, I am the baby sister that Kenny did not ask for. It's important for me to get this right for my brother, so I'm going to read something I wrote, because most of you all know that I'm a wimp, and I cry. Okay. Kenny was many things to many people: a world traveler, an award-winning journalist, a dedicated lobbyist, a father, a grandfather, but beyond the accolades and accomplishments, to me, he was simply my brother. Growing up, our mom used to say, "Choose a life and live it." Well, we all know that Kenny led a life well lived. He explored the world in a way few could, whether it was reporting from the front lines, advocating for causes he passionately believed in, or simply seeking out new experiences. His stories from around the world were more than just tales of places. They were chapters of a novel of his rich life. Kenny took our mother's words to heart. He lived with passion and with purpose. I know that while we mourn his loss today, we all celebrate the incredible life my brother led. On a personal note, I remember days before our brother Ricky passed in 2022, it was a tense and emotional time. and my brother Kenny and I got into a little sibling spat. Shortly after, Kenny said something funny. We both laughed, and we shared a hug in a way that a brother and sister could, full of love, forgiveness, and understanding. An unspoken connection that said everything. This memory I will hold very dear. I will also hold the many times that I would see my brother, Kenneth Walker, ABC News. I said, Mom, Kenneth Walker, ABC News is on TV. And I would just be so proud of him that that's my brother, that I would just go around the house, Kenneth Walker, ABC News. I will always be proud of Kenneth Walker, ABC News. Kenny, I will miss you calling me baby sister, and thank you, big brother, for showing us what it means to live a full life. You want to sit or you want to say it? I'm just going to say two things. I didn't prepare a speech, but I thought you all might find some humor in two things that I will never forget about my Uncle Kenny. The first was he used to come to my house and bring Maisha several times a month to spend the weekends with us. He took us to the finest restaurants, got us all dolled up, had me thinking that I was drinking alcohol when all I had was simply a Shirley Temple. He had this green Volkswagen convertible. He used to get us all dolled up, had our hair all done, only by the time we arrived to these restaurants, my hair would be all over the place because it was convertible, and he always drove like a bat out of hell, always. The other thing I wanted to share with you is that he was very passionate about knowing which direction you were going to take after high school. So when I graduated with an English degree from the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, he was so proud of me. Well, what are you going to do with that English degree? Oh, I'm going to law school, so I thought. So after I graduated, I took the LSAT a couple times, and I'm like, yeah, this isn't for me. I can't do it. What do you mean you can't do it? You will do it. I'm like, yeah, no. So some time passed. I did a clerical job at Department of Education and then Department of Transportation. So he would constantly be on my back. What are you going to do? You can't, your mom did not pay for you to be a secretary with a 4-year English degree. What are you going to do? You need to figure it out, and you need to call me back and let me know which direction you're going to go. So I avoided him for like as much as I could for the next couple years. Then I told him my plan, which was to join Montgomery County Police Department. That's the dumbest idea that I've ever heard you come up with. That is not for you. I said, well, what about Jeff? You didn't say that to Jeffrey. He was the police officer. Yeah, well, Jeffrey's a male. We don't have police in our family. You're not going to be able to do that. You need to find something else. So I told him, well, guess what? I'm starting the police academy in 3 weeks. So this is what it's going to be. Okay, well, you'll try it, and then you'll thank me later for telling you weren't going to be able to do it. So I made it through the police academy. He stayed in constant communication with me as I traveled my way through the police department. 29 years later, when I retired, he said, I couldn't be prouder of you. And, you know, you actually, you have to be passionate about what it is that you take on and believe it yourself to get anybody else to believe it. So if I could leave any imparting words, is that correct? I should know.
is just to remain passionate about what it is that you want to do, no matter how anybody else feels about it, because I'm sure other than Uncle Kenny telling me how proud he was, he really believed in his heart that I did the best that I possibly could as a Montgomery County police officer for 29 years. So I will miss my Uncle Kenny, and I know that he is another angel. I have a couple on this side, but I'll put him over here, so. All right. Thank you guys for being here.
Thank you, Anna, for throwing me under the bus, because I had nothing to do with that conversation with you and Kenny. Nothing. Next, we will have Lerma Rackley, who began, I believe, as a coworker, but morphed into so much more. His sister, his confidant, and one of his best friends.
Hi, everybody. I'm going to do like Kenny's baby sister and read this thing so I don't bawl out of control before I can get to the end. I met Kenny when I came to the Washington Evening Star in the fall of 1970. I was 21, he was 19, and almost instantly he became like the younger brother I never had. I had been deeply involved in the civil rights movement as a young teen in Orangeburg, South Carolina, so I immediately recognized a kindred spirit. We all know that Kenny devoted much of his professional life as a journalist to calling out racism and its insidious effects on people of African ancestry at home and abroad. His commitment to justice was already in full swing in those early days at the Star, as Black employees worked to end disparities in news coverage of Black and white communities and to get the Star to hire a more diverse staff, including getting a Black copy editor on the Metro desk. Kenny led the drive to get the union to back us up on that mandate. Kenny also did everything he could in his personal life to ensure that children, especially his beloved daughter Mia, and every other child in his orbit, nieces, nephews, cousins, and later his grandchildren, would know their heritage and be proud of it. That's why a few years later, when I was 5 months pregnant, I asked Kenny to be my child's godfather. Without letting a second go by, he replied, "What took you so long?" Kenny knew how to instantly reassure his friends that he was there for them. Fast forward to April 30th, 1977, and I'm 8 months pregnant, working the noon to 8 p.m. shift as a copy editor on the Metro desk. Kenny was a reporter on the national desk by that time. He called as my shift ended and asked me to swing by his house to taste a dish he was taking to a party that evening. Kenny loved to entertain, and he liked to share his culinary skills with friends. As tired as I was, I accepted his invitation, enjoyed the food, and told Kenny I was sure his dish would be a big hit, and I headed home. A couple of hours later, my stomach started cramping, like maybe I'd eaten something that didn't agree with me. My first thought was, oh no, I wonder if the seafood in Kenny's dish is giving me all this pain. I had no way of calling Kenny to give him a heads up to check if anyone else had reported a similar reaction. But after the pain kept coming at timed intervals, I knew I'd better head into DC to the hospital. True enough, it wasn't the food. I'd gone into labor 3 weeks early. But when Kenny got the news, he immediately told all of our friends that his food's magical properties should get the credit for my son entering the world on May 1st. That was the way to have Ramal born under the symbolism of number 1, representing the confidence and high self-worth that Kenny wanted for young Black children growing up in a society that often purposely promoted another vision. Kenny followed up about 4 months later in August 1977, taking the lead in organizing an African naming ceremony for my son so that the ancestors could add on their blessings and protection. And he didn't stop there. He embraced his godfather role completely, making time to come to Ramal's sporting events and graduations all the way through college. Honestly, I thought maybe Kenny had cloned himself because he was available to his family and friends to such a remarkable degree throughout his life. Clearly, Kenny gave a lot of people the impression that each was his very best friend, which couldn't possibly be true without him cloning himself, since I was actually his very best friend. Only kidding, guys. I know Kenny's heart was just that big. He had space in it and enough genuine love to go around for all of us. My heart aches when I face the reality that I can't call him and hear his magnificent voice on the other end of the line again in this life. If there is another life or two to live, I pray that I will cross paths with him again every time, and we can pick up where we left off, eternally friends. Love you, Kenny.
Thank you, Irma. Our next speaker will be Dr. Melancon, who so graciously performed the transplant when Kenny needed a kidney, and has also become family simply based on his graciousness.
Perfect. Well, I'm so honored to be here because, unlike you guys, I met Mr. Walker much later in his life, and but I must tell you, he did have a profound impact on me. I met him at a transition. First of all, I should tell you, I'm Keith Melanton. I'm a transplant surgeon. I run the transplant program at George Washington, and this is a particularly proud time in my life because I'm Creole, I'm from Louisiana, and now the Pope, and I'm Catholic, and the Pope is Creole from Louisiana. So, I met Mr. Walker at a transition in his life because, as you've heard and as you know, he had kind of a mixed feeling about America, right? He had spent a lot of time writing about the racial problems here, and then he goes off to South Africa, and he lived there and loved Africa, and then he came back when he was sick. So this place that he had these mixed feelings for, was the best place for him to get medical care. So I met him because he had kidney disease, and unfortunately, a lot of people in this country, particularly our people, we have kidney disease. There are well over 1 million people in this country. And about a little over 100,000 people have what's called end-stage renal disease, and that's what he had. When you get to that point, then the only thing that keeps you alive is dialysis or a transplant. And I always tell my patients it's a race against the clock, because once you have kidney disease to the point where you're on dialysis, then every year your mortality increases markedly. So he knew this. I mean, he was a very intelligent man. I remember when I was in college, I always loved literature. I always loved to read English, and I often wondered what it would be like to have met Richard Wright or W.B. Du Bois, these famous African expats. And, when I met him, that's what it was like for me. It was like, talking to someone that was brilliant and an intellectual and had lived in Africa, and we talked about it. I remember my nurses joking because I went to meet him and have just like a typical doctor-patient discussion about kidney disease, and I was in there for well over an hour, and the nurse came in knocking like, what's going on, But as you know, he was that kind of a person. And like I said, he really became very inspirational to me in the sense that, talking to someone like him got me to understand life in a way that, it's like these African griots, right? They are a treasure for us because they pass on this knowledge that we're supposed to pass on to the next generation. But anyway, we meet, he goes through all the testing, and we put him on the list for a transplant. And I told him, I said, it takes about 5 to 6 years to wait on that list if you don't have a donor. And sure enough, one of the, again, ironies is that one of his classmates, one of his high school classmates from 1969, my parents were in high school around the same time. So, I know what it was like from hearing from them, what was going on in the country at that time. And it was just really ironic that a classmate from that time who would be white would step forward to save his life, And I remember when I met Mr. Ball, first I met him on the telephone, and it was just this bubbly guy, he was just so anxious to try to save the life of his classmate. And although they had been friends in high school, they hadn't really been close through all those years. I mean, they kept in touch, but they weren't like the closest of friends through all those many years. And I am reminded of, the shortest verse in the Bible is Jesus wept. Right? Jesus wept. And why was he crying? He was crying because his friend Lazarus had died. And this is Jesus, right? The Savior, the Christ. He knew he was going to save Lazarus' life, but he cried because he's 100% divine, but he's also 100% human, right? And so I think that should inspire us all, because what we're supposed to be doing, the golden rule is to do for others what you would have them do for you. So when I got those two guys together, it was just absolutely magical, not just for me, but for my entire team. And, it goes out on the news wave, so it was inspirational to so many people, and it still is. For this white guy to fly back from across the country to give his kidney to a friend, right? The ultimate golden rule. And so we bring them in. It was like it was like they had never skipped a beat, right? They had been the closest of friends for their entire lives. And the operation went great, and the recovery went great. And like I said, when you get to that point in kidney disease, you are starting to spiral, because what happens, people don't realize this, but when you don't have the function of one of your organs, it accelerates other problems. So that's why people die so quickly of vascular and cardiovascular disease when they have end-stage renal disease. So what Charlie gave him was not a kidney, he gave him life. He gave him 7 years of life he definitely would never have had. And he remains one of the favorites in my clinic because, that deep voice, and he always had something to say. Sometimes I would just see him in the hall. He wasn't coming to visit with me because, as a surgeon, I only see the patients for a relatively short period of time, but they still come to the clinic to see the medicine doctors. So I would see him in the hall and just quickly say hi to him, but he always had some kernel of knowledge, some little thing, because we would have this kind of way of looking at each other, because we would always talk about politics and stuff, and he would just look at me like, can you freaking believe this, and it was always about something that was going on. So obviously that continued with things that have happened recently. I last saw him just about 2 weeks before he passed. And like I said, he has had a profound effect on me, and as a Catholic, as a Christian, to see what his friend did for him and how much he loved him as a result of that long friendship, but particularly the joke that God can play on us sometimes, right? Which is, humans can be wonderful, wonderful creations, no matter if we are white, black, Muslim, Christian, whatever. And I got to see that up close. It changed my life, because the way these things do, and it changed a lot of other people's lives and their vantage points. And so I thank you for letting me be here today, because he was and is a phenomenal person. Thank you.
not a doctor, but I play one on TV, and I understand the scheduling and your graciousness in giving us your day. So thank you again, Doctor. If you're able, I would ask that you would stand, and he should still be on Zoom. Can we give Charlie Ball a resounding round of applause? Thank you. As is Charlie Ball, instead of putting others at risk and getting sick, he decided to stay in California, and I think that's just Charlie, right? That's just who he was. So Ronnie had something about Charlie that he left out.
Thank you, Jeff. I failed to, on the first picture, I had intended to make this comment. As Dr. Melanson said, Kenny was experiencing challenges with dialysis. And so Kenny wrote the most magnificent letter I've ever seen, looking for a donor. And he asked if it were possible for Carroll High School to send it out to our class, which we arranged for that to happen. And this is the point I wanted to make. In 24 to 48 hours, Kenny got an email from Charlie Ball. 24 to 48 hours. So in my initial comments, I introduced him as the incredible Charlie Ball. That is why.
Before I introduce our next speaker, I just wanted to talk to the kidney disease that is running rampant in the African American community. We had that experience personally where my mom and Kenny were both dialysis patients at the same time. And while she, I think, weathered it a little better, it was devastating for him. I would go see him and he would be zapped like 24 hours a day. So when we went for her initial screening, a fella who had received a kidney that had failed, he said it's either preparing for dialysis, it's dialysis, or coming off dialysis, and that's your life. And indeed it was. And while Mom weathered it a little better, it was absolutely devastating for him, and he wasn't going to make it. So Charlie truly saved his life. At about 78, Mom got a kidney. And the funny thing is, I shed a tear on the way after the surgery. Like, she'd made it, but it never really dawned on me that at some point I'd lose her. So I'm thankful for her to receive that kidney, and I'm thankful for all of you and Kenny's circle, because it was devastating for him, and Charlie truly saved his life. And on that note, his nurse, friend, ex-sister-in-law, and one of his besties, Pam Lawson, is here, and hopefully she will shed a word on her time with Kenny.
Dr. Melican, good to see you. One thing about going last, close to the end, is everyone has said everything. But bear with me, there may be a nugget here and there and a little laugh here and there that's still yet to come. My name is Pamela Lawson, and I am Kenny's ex-sister-in-law, Jackie's sister, Tepresa's mother, and your friend, as we're all here friends of Kenny. One early Saturday morning, I was on a call speaking with a nursing supervisor when the other phone rang. She answered the desk phone on the speaker, Howard University Hospital. A gentleman was on the other line, inquiring about how to donate a body to the College of Medicine. He said, It was the wishes of a relative who had just passed. My heart dropped because somehow I knew. She asked, "What's the patient's name?" And he answered, "Kenneth Walker." Serendipity. Kenny came into my life when I was just shy of 10. My earliest memories are in my parents' basement, sitting on the Scandinavian legged furniture, black lights washing the walls, highlighting the neon posters of large afros and bold shades affixed with masking tape on the walls. Can you see that? Kenny, Jackie, and my brother were leaning over the LP stereo console, singing Stevie Wonder, Isaac Hayes, and occasionally breaking out with their own version of James Brown's Footwork, and Kenny could dance. They were dancing to Papa Got a Brand New Bag. On another occasion, Kenny broke out crooning in an unprompted melody by Roberta Flack, serenading my sister. The first time ever I saw your face. What a beautiful voice he had, and we heard that earlier. It was soulful and soul-filled, a gift he passed on to your mama, Maisha. Those were the days. But as life happened and years passed, we went our separate ways. In July of 2016, I received a call from my niece, Maisha, that her dad was in South Africa and his health was failing. She was concerned. He, as we heard earlier, was in kidney failure. I told her to ask him to call me because this was my life's work, caring for people with kidney failure at Howard University Hospital. After a lengthy conversation, Kenny agreed to see our top nephrologist and medical director, Dr. Constance Murray. Now, I must say, she was not just your ordinary physician. I knew she was a patient-focused, practicing the latest evidence-based medicine, and could go toe-to-toe intellectually with Kenny. He had a million questions. And when their visit finally was over, he moved back to DC and started coming to Howard University Hospital's dialysis center. She became one of his toughest and most supportive practitioners. As days became weeks and weeks became months, Kenny began to look a little better, feel a little better. But as we heard, dialysis can be draining. I knew that was not the end that he was hoping for. Howard University Hospital is the home of the renowned pioneer, Dr. Clive Callender, who opened this country's first minority-directed dialysis and transplant center. The center has treated 2 Washington, D.C. mayors, several judges, and has achieved the top Medicare quality outcomes and was recognized for the highest patient experience ratings locally and nationally. Our excellence met Kenny's excellence. But again, I knew that was not what he was waiting for. In 2018, in his Kenny bravura, he sent out an email, as you heard earlier, to his alma mater, Carroll High School, simply titled, "A Request for Life." And Charlie Ball, as you heard, responded within 24 to 48 hours. Charlie said he remembered the name and felt compelled to respond. As God would have it, they matched. Kenny went on to receive the gift of life from Mr. Ball. and Kenny maintained their destined bonds until his passing. Sadly, the dialysis center, which was a beacon of hope for so many, was forced to close in 2023 under the weight of increasing financial burden and reimbursement inequities in our minority hospitals. And I say that because I too am political and want to voice out the concerns for our health care, especially today. Kenny and I often talked about political climate in the dialysis unit, and we spent hours over hours talking every time he came 3 times a week. And of course, we often debated. In closing, I'm here today to speak to the persistence of an individual. I'm here to speak to the centeredness and the conviction of our family member, our colleague, and our friend. And to my grandnieces, things that I've learned from your Baba. Never put off what you can do thinking there is tomorrow. It is not promised. He invited me to come down to South Africa. And life happened and time passed, and I never took that opportunity. So, as opportunities provide itself, take advantage of them. Through adversity, maintain courage and a firmness of mind. Kenny demonstrated courage, foresight, and mental strength to resist adversity every day. Stay centered. Kenny stayed centered, and I could often find him meditating in a corner. He maintained hope and reflected on finding solutions, not just the problem. And lastly, give back. Kenny always remembered the invaluable gift of life he was afforded by Mr. Ball. For the advancement of promising physicians and treatments, he arranged for the donation of his body to the Howard University's College of Medicine. As I reflect on that early morning call, I know for everything there is a purpose. Kenny, may you receive the fullness of joy and peace, and may your selfless act yield much fruit. I thank you for my life's lessons, and I thank you for your legacy of life that moves on. Thank you.
Thank you for those words, Pammy. She's given me permission to be in the circle and call her Pammy. Next, we'll have a word from one of Kenny's closest friends, like 40-year colleague and friend, Mr. Sam Ford.
Hello, everybody. First, I would like to say Maureen Bunyan called me yesterday. A few weeks ago, we had another thing at the GW Journalism School. She was there, but she said this time she couldn't make it because her sister's in ICU, and she's on her way to Wisconsin to be with her sister, and she doesn't think she has a long time to live. But anyway. Just wanted to pass that on to you. But yeah, Kenny was a good friend of mine. And, it's one of those things that he was a good friend of mine. He was also a good friend of my wife's. And we met Kenny after Gloria is my late wife. We had our honeymoon in Africa, in Zimbabwe, right? And so we just got back to Atlanta, where we were living at that time. And we were all covering this missing and murdered children's trial. At that time, Gloria was a reporter for CNN. I was a reporter for CBS. And then we met Kenny Walker, who came down from D.C., and we immediately became friends, you know? And, you know, like sometimes what would happen is that, you know, at least in that time, when there would be a big story and there were a number of black reporters, we would all kind of come together and have a party, you know? I know when the NAACP met in Miami and the reporters would get together to have a party. Well, anyway, since we lived in Atlanta, we would occasionally have a party and reporters would come over. And so Kenny was one of the reporters that would hang with us, and we got to be quite good friends. Now, in many ways, Kenny is a city boy. I'm a country boy. I'm from a small town in Kansas. And my wife is also from Kansas, was from Kansas. And so anyway, as I said, we would hang. And the story that I remember was that we had the people at the party. I had a car I needed to turn into Hertz. And I asked Kenny, I said, Kenny, would you follow me to the airport so I could turn this car in? And so he did. And of course, I was really lit by that time. And I'm driving, and I don't know what happened, but what I do remember is that I had taken out a road sign at an exit. And Kenny came up to the car and said, "Get out the car." And I got out the car, and he took me to his car and said, "Get in the car." And we backed out. And I was like, whoa, what's going on here? I just took out this sign. Kenny starts driving. And I said, I got to go to the airport and talk about this car. He's driving. He's like going, 60 miles an hour down the perimeter, which is Atlanta's beltway. And so he looks at me finally. I said, "Look, stop. I've got to go back and deal with this." And he looked at me and he said, "You bad motherfucker, get out." And of course, I wasn't going to get out of a speeding car. But I went on home and called Hertz and told him the car was somewhere. I wasn't sure where. Anyway, you know, it's one of those interesting things. I think if it had not been Kenny Walker, had not put me in that car and taken me home, there would have been a little story in the Atlanta Constitution saying, CBS correspondent arrested for drunk and driving. And I guess the statute of limitations has run out, so I can talk about that. But anyway, again, we had conversations. One story I just got to share with you that Kenny told me about Washington, I was like, really? He said his brother set their house on fire when he was there, when they were kids, playing with matches or something, I don't know. And he said that when the fire department came, he said his parents were in shock, you know, though this happened. And he said the fire chief took off his belt and gave his brother a whipping. I was like, really? I mean, these are incredible stories that Kenny told. You know, he lived up on 4th Street. I live on 12th Street, and we didn't live that far apart. So sometimes, you know, I would just, you know, go over to Kenny's house. Fireworks, you know, he had a good view of the fireworks from his house. And so on the 4th of July, you could go over and sit with Kenny and watch the fireworks. Again, when my wife, Gloria, when she was ill, you know, Kenny was really there, talking to me constantly. And, you know, I was thinking about it when we had her last birthday. The last birthday was May 9th of 2021, and we had a little party at the house, and there was me and Gloria, obviously, and my daughter, Gina, and Kenny. It was just the 4 of us. And I'll have a birthday next week. And my last birthday was me and Kenny. Kenny called me up and says, "I'm taking you to lunch for your birthday." So we went to lunch, and we had a good time sitting there on 8th Street for my birthday. And so, as I said, it's one of those things. He's a good friend. You know, it's just hard to believe, you know. But one thing I put on Facebook was when I went to Africa recently, and Kenny had called me up and says, well, you know, let's do lunch again. Call me up, and we're going to, you know, tell me about your trip. And I was going to do it, and I was going to do it. And, you know, and then I get a call from Jeff. And I said, oh, no. And that's why I said, if you want to do something, do it. Do not wait and say, oh, I'll get to it. No, do it. And that's one of the things I regret, that Kenny and I did not go to lunch so I could talk to him about my trip. Anyway, that's it. See you later.
Sam, I will say that if there's one thing he knew, it was your heart. So you're good. In closing, I'd like to share a personal story. At about 14, I went away to prep school outside of Boston in the mid-'70s amidst forced busing and a whole ton of turmoil. And it was Kenny and my uncle, Cy, who kept me off the ledge and out of jail. Kenny sent me some Baldwin and Giovanni books, and Cy's words kept me literally off the ledge and out of jail. And it's recently that I've really, really learned how being a young man, a teen in the late 60s, formed his personality and his perseverance and his fight. So now it makes sense how he could keep me off the ledge, because he'd walk the walk and talk the talk. Kenny was family first. You've heard the accolades, Emmy-winning National Association of Black Journalists. Going through his belongings at his home has been therapeutic and hard. I have the Scrabble piece, and it will be yours. The who's who of black journalists. So for us, he was Kenny, but for the world, he was a stalwart, and we'll always remember that. His desire to have South Africa, his adopted home, exposed to everyone shows who he was. I remember going there, and I was beyond smitten with South Africa. If I had 2 nickels, I would have been there. And he said, well, why? I said, what do you mean? It's spectacular. He said, if you're here to take, the country will chew you out and spit you out. If you're here to give, then you're here for the right reasons. And I think 16 years in the country lets us know where he was in that. So I know his heart is full because he hears us, he's with us, and I know that his profound wish is that the 3 of you take every opportunity to live life to the absolute fullest. Jordan, stop showing me that one video where you cross up your father in basketball, because I think you photoshopped it. So, you know, you got to make some more, man. Yeah, I'm not buying that one. You have family for life. You have family around the world. You know, Lana, you're now the world citizen flying around the world. Lauren is catching a flight this afternoon to go back abroad to do her thing. And Jordan, we're ready to read about you. So you've got it all right? Thank you all for joining us. I am appreciative and love you all dearly. We have a ton of food, and please don't tell me you're not, because we got to do something with it. So we have the place until 4. Let's break bread. Let's share some new memories. And again, thank you all for coming. All right.